Hello and welcome to Wisdom Loop. Today we review Francis Fukuyama's recent book, Identity, the Demand for Dignity and the Politics of Resentment. As some of you might know, Francis Fukuyama is a major global figure in political science who is mostly famous for a book he published in 1992 named The End of History and the Last Man, which provoked a written response from his former professor, Samuel Huntington, which became another famous book you've probably heard of, The Clash of Civilizations. Fukuyama says his more recent two-volume publications, The Origin of Political Order and Political Decay, were basically the rewrite of The End of History based on his current understanding of world politics. Right off the bat, in his Identity book, Fukuyama says this book would not have been written had Donald J. Trump not been the elected president. So given the importance of identity and the richness of Fukuyama's book, I think Donald Trump deserves some credit for this book being written. Amazon's description of this book says, Identity is an urgent and necessary book, a sharp warning that unless we forge a universal understanding of human dignity, we will doom ourselves to continuing conflict. And I do fully agree with that. In his book, Fukuyama masterfully combines rich historical, philosophical, and psychological perspectives of identity with a keen observation of what is happening today to tell us why identity is important. He goes as far back as the ancient Greece to give us a description of human soul and to tell us that thumos, or the desire for dignity and self-worth, is the seed of today's identity politics. Fukuyama tells us that the modern understanding of thumos has roots in the distinction between inner and outer self, and rising of the moral valuation of inner self over outer society that started in modern Europe, and the evolving concept of dignity, in which recognition is due not just to a narrow class of people, but to everyone, which turned the private quest for self-worth into a political project. Fukuyama says that thumos, or desire for dignity, was initially the prerogative of the guardian or warrior class. Then it became universalized in the Christian tradition, and later was secularized by Immanuel Kant. But it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau who centered dignity on the recovery of authentic inner being, which he thought was suppressed by the society. A California task force that was working on promoting self-esteem and personal and social responsibility released a report in the early 90s that said the point is not to become acceptable or worthy, but to acknowledge the worthiness that already exists. Fukuyama finds this an expression of long line of ideas that trace back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. As a result, the liberal society came to be seen responsible for helping people achieve that actualization. The necessity of understanding dignity this way is very much reflected in a famous quote by Justice Kennedy, where he says, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and the mystery of human life." Now, this expectation from the society and government in the West, of course, helped many people realize and maximize their potentials. But it also had its own side effect: narcissism. Gradually, for a lot of people, being treated equal was replaced with being treated special, because Fukuyama says shared experiences were replaced with lived experiences, which were the subjective perception of shared experiences. But none of these are meant to undermine the importance of dignity for people. For the poor, invisibility to the rich or to the elite is perceived as their dignity not being realized and respected, which is even more painful than lack of resources. Lower female pay is a problem for the same reason. top female executives make much more than most men do, but making less than their male counterparts is rightfully felt as a disrespect to their dignity as women. Fukuyama believes that gay marriage and Me Too movements, and even Brexit and Trump's election, are reactions to perceived blow to dignity or to invisibility of respective groups and communities. He says that unlike economic interest, identity interests cannot be negotiated because they are based on mostly fixed biological and ethnic characteristics that cannot be abridged. With the growth of autonomy and individualism, the question of finding shared values that are needed for making a healthy social life possible became more important, because we won't even be able to communicate without the collective identity and shared values. Do you remember the marketplace of ideas we discussed in our episode on compassion? Fukuyama basically says that the collective identity and shared values are the common currencies we need for successful transactions in the marketplace of ideas. And we think that collective identity and shared values will not be implemented without the help of compassion. Identities are part of what defines us as humans. Fukuyama says the condition of modernity is to have multiple identities, ones that are shaped by social interactions on any number of levels. By race, by gender, by birthplace, and even by our favorite artist and football team. He believes that lived experiences can eventually be translated into shared experiences and a larger and more integrated national identity, or what Fukuyama calls overarching identity, should be defined. What we teach, our history, and what we celebrate are all part of this overarching identity that defines us. Fukuyama says that even though societies can benefit from diversity, they should build their identities not around diversity, but around substantive ideas like equality and the rule of law. Now, these are all cool things to know, but how can you benefit from this cool information? First of all, you can do your own part in defining an overarching narrative for your society. Being nice and honest to others are not just ethical things to do. Since everyone, regardless of their native identity, can relate with these virtues like kindness and honesty, these qualities help create an identity that can encompass and link individual identities and act as an overarching narrative that we need for defining us as a society. Last but not least, we will discuss the importance of identity on individual level more in our episode on negotiation techniques. But for now, try to avoid creating what I call micro-identity in your conversations, debates, or negotiation. That means you don't want to put your counterpart in an unnecessary position that they feel like they have to defend to save face. If you link the dignity of your counterpart to a false identity, they might even act against their own interests to satisfy their sense of pride. Once again, more to be said about this when we discuss negotiation techniques. Hope to have you all with us then. Have a dignified day.